I was gripping the foil-wrapped pie so tightly that my knuckles turned white, the steam from the still warm apple filling fogging up the car windows. It was my mom's favorite, her classic recipe with a dash of cinnamon and a hint of bourbon the way she always insisted. I'd driven 3 hours in the rain, navigating winding back roads through the fog-choked hills to make it home for Thanksgiving. I thought I'd timed it perfectly. Just as the sun slipped behind the oak trees and the porch light flickered on, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. As I walked up the front steps, the familiar creak of the porch boards under my boots felt like an old, forgotten song. The door swung open before I could knock, and for a moment I thought it was a warm welcome. But Dad's eyes were cold, his face set in a rigid, unreadable line. He didn't say a word, just stepped back to let me in, his gaze dropping to the pie in my hands before he turned and walked back into the dining room. I followed my pulse quickening. Something felt off. Inside, the air was thick with the sense of roasted turkey sage stuffing and the sharp tang of fresh cranberry sauce. A sensory overload that always made this old house feel alive. The clinking of glassware, the soft rustle of napkins, the quiet murmurs of a family pretending everything was fine. But this time there was a tension, a crackling undercurrent that I hadn't felt before. I placed the pie carefully on the counter, my hands trembling slightly, and forced a smile as I stepped into the dining room. Everyone was already seated. My brother Nathan, his wife Carla, my younger sister Emma, and my mother, her face tight with something I couldn't quite place. Dad took his seat at the head of the table, folding his hands together as if preparing for a prayer. For a moment, I thought we were about to say grace, that we might clasp hands, bow our heads, and give thanks as we'd always done. But then, Dad cleared his throat, his jaw tightening as he fixed his eyes on me. "Don't bother sitting down, Lauren," he said, his voice sharper than the carving knife on the table. "Not until you give back the $50,000 you took." The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that drowns out every other sound. I felt my heartbeat in my ears, a dull, panicked thrum. For a second, I wondered if I'd misheard him, if this was some twisted, ill-timed joke. But the way my mother wouldn't meet my eyes, the way Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, confirmed my worst fear. This was no joke. "Excuse me." I managed to choke out my voice, a whisper in the suffocating quiet. "Don't act like you don't know," my dad continued, his eyes narrowing. "The money from your mother's account. It disappeared right after you helped her set up that new online banking app." My stomach dropped. I'd helped Mom set up her online banking a few weeks ago, spending a rainy Sunday afternoon at this very table, patiently walking her through the steps, writing down passwords, double-checking security settings. She'd been nervous about it, muttering about identity theft and digital pickpockets, but I'd convinced her it was safer, easier. And now they thought I'd used that trust to steal from her. "Dad, you can't seriously believe I would," I began, but my sister Emma cut me off, her voice trembling but determined. "The bank confirmed it, Lauren. 3 withdrawals, all within days of each other, all just below the federal reporting threshold. It wasn't random." I looked to my mother, hoping for some sign of support, some flicker of the unconditional love I'd always felt from her. But she just sat there, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the embroidered edge of her napkin. She couldn't even look at me. My throat tightened, the familiar warmth of the house suddenly replaced by a chill that seeped into my bones. I felt the sting of betrayal sharper than the cold autumn wind that had followed me in. This was my family. The people who had raised me laughed with me, celebrated my every small victory. And now they looked at me as if I was a stranger, a criminal. "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice steadier now, anger creeping into my words. "You know me. You know I'd never do that." Dad's eyes didn't waver. "If you're innocent, prove it. But until then, you're not welcome here." The finality of his words cut deeper than any blade. I felt my world shift, the ground beneath me, cracking like the brittle autumn leaves outside. Without another word, I turned and walked back to the kitchen, the pie I'd baked with love, now nothing more than a reminder of a home that no longer felt like mine. As I reached the front door, I hesitated, my hand on the cold brass handle. I wanted to turn back, to scream, to demand an explanation, but I knew it would fall on deaf ears. Instead, I stepped out into the night, the wind biting against my face, the darkness swallowing the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. The drive back to my apartment felt endless, the miles stretching out like the yawning chasm that had just opened between me and the only family I'd ever known. And as I pulled into my darkened driveway, the pie still on the passenger seat beside me, I realized I'd lost more than just a holiday dinner. I'd lost my place at the table. I clenched the steering wheel, my breath fogging the windshield, and whispered to the empty car, "If they want to treat me like a criminal, maybe it's time I start acting like one." I barely remember the drive home. The rain-slicked roads blurred past the rhythmic swish of the wipers matching my pulse. I kept replaying Dad's words, the accusation cutting through my thoughts like a cold blade. I'd grown up in that house, learned to ride a bike on its cracked driveway, helped Mom bake cookies for every bake sale, every school event, every small-town fundraiser. Now, it felt like those memories had been snatched from me, rewritten as evidence of a crime I hadn't committed. Back at my apartment, I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter, the jangle echoing in the empty space. I dropped onto the worn leather couch, the one I'd salvaged from a curb when I first moved in. It had felt like freedom then, a symbol of my independence. Now it just felt like a reminder of how far I'd fallen in my family's eyes. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket, the screen lighting up with a dozen missed messages from my brother Nathan, my sister Emma, and even Carla, who barely said 2 words to me during the best of times. I hesitated before unlocking it. My thumb hovered over Nathan's last message. "Don't make this worse, Lauren. Just come clean." I tossed the phone onto the cushion beside me, my jaw tightening. Come clean. About what? My mind spun, replaying every detail of that Sunday I'd helped Mom with her online banking. I'd walked her through every step, answered her questions about security, written down the passwords in her notebook, the one she always kept in the kitchen drawer right next to the old recipe cards and mismatched pens. I trusted her to keep it safe. It had been a quiet, rainy afternoon, the kitchen windows fogged up from the lasagna Mom had baking in the oven. She'd been nervous, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed in her account numbers, her social security, the answers to her security questions. I'd reassured her, reminded her how important it was to keep everything secure to trust the process. So how had this happened? I stood up, pacing the narrow strip of space between my couch and the tiny dining table I rarely used. Had I missed something? Had someone else been in the house that day? I remembered Emma had been in and out, dropping off laundry like she always did, her messy blonde hair dripping from the rain, leaving wet footprints on the kitchen tiles. Nathan had called twice during that time, his voice booming through the Bluetooth speaker as Mom put him on speakerphone, asking about his new job, his latest project, his perfect picture book life. I sank back into the couch, pressing my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. No, this couldn't be right. My family might be distant, wrapped up in their own lives, but they weren't criminals. They weren't the kind of people who would frame their own blood. Would they? I felt the slow burn of suspicion creep into my mind like smoke seeping through a crack in a door. What if this wasn't just a mistake? What if it was deliberate? I knew from years of auditing financial records that fraud often started small. A little white lie, a harmless favor, a minor oversight that snowballed into something much darker. I'd seen it play out in spreadsheets and balance sheets 100 times, but I never thought I'd be living it. I grabbed my laptop, flipping it open, the glow from the screen casting sharp shadows on the walls. My fingers moved on instinct, pulling up the banking app, my mind already calculating, cross-referencing, piecing together fragments of conversations I hadn't thought twice about before. First, I checked my mother's account, or at least tried to. I couldn't log in. The password I'd helped her set up just weeks ago had been changed. I tried again, double-checking for typos, but the screen flashed red each time, the app scolding me like a disappointed parent. Incorrect password. I leaned back, my breath coming faster. Someone had locked me out. Someone who had access to that little notebook. My mind flashed to Emma, her constant presence in the house, her carefree attitude toward privacy. Nathan, with his long history of cutting corners and skating by on charm. Carla, who always seemed to know more than she let on, her eyes sharp even when her words were dull. The pieces started falling into place, each one heavier than the last. I knew what I had to do. If my family wanted to cast me as the villain in their little drama, I'd play the part, but on my terms. I clicked over to my firm's secure server, pulling up the financial investigation tools I'd used 100 times before. They wanted a thief. Fine, I'd show them what a real thief looked like. The next morning, I woke to the harsh buzz of my alarm, the sky outside my window still a dull, indifferent gray. I dragged myself to the kitchen, the smell of yesterday's coffee grounds still lingering in the air. I filled my mug, the ceramic one I'd painted at one of those overpriced paint and sip studios, and leaned against the counter, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. My mind felt clearer this morning, the fog of shock and betrayal lifting, replaced by a sharper, colder resolve. They wanted me to prove my innocence. Fine, but I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to uncover the truth. All of it. I opened my laptop, fingers flying over the keys as I logged into my work server, pulling up the secure network I'd used for countless forensic audits. I'd built my career on finding money trails, tracking down ghost transactions, and unearthing financial schemes that others thought they'd buried deep enough to be forgotten. I knew the signs, the patterns, the little digital breadcrumbs that people left behind when they thought they were clever. First, I checked Mom's bank account. I couldn't access it directly, not without her login, but I knew a backdoor, an old habit from my early days in corporate forensics. I navigated to the transaction history using a tool I'd developed to analyze account activity. My heart thudded as the data loaded lines of text filling the screen, each one a tiny fragment of a story someone hoped I'd never read. The withdrawals matched what Emma had accused me of 3 separate transactions each, just under the federal reporting limit. Classic structuring. But something didn't add up. I noticed the timing. The withdrawals weren't evenly spaced. The first one had hit on a Tuesday morning, the second late on a Friday night, and the last one on a Sunday afternoon, all from different locations. The odds of my mother making those exact withdrawals at those exact times from those exact branches were slim. She barely drove to the grocery store these days, let alone across town 3 times in a week. I leaned closer, my pulse quickening. Whoever had done this wasn't just sloppy. They were arrogant, assuming no one would look deeper than the bank statement. I copied the transaction codes, cross-referencing them with the security footage request forms I had access to through my firm's internal network. It would take a few hours for the files to come through, but I already had a gut feeling about what I'd find. I opened another tab, this one for the mobile carrier account Mom had used to set up her banking notifications. I remembered Emma mentioning a new phone she'd bought on a whim a few months back. A sleek little device she'd shown off at dinner one night, the screen practically blinding me across the table as she scrolled through her endless social media feeds. If someone had been intercepting Mom's verification codes, it would have been through a secondary device, something linked to her account but not in her name. Sure enough, when I pulled the metadata, I found a secondary number attached to Mom's account, one that had been registered just days before the first withdrawal. I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening around the edge of the laptop. Someone had cloned Mom's access. Not just her account, but her entire digital footprint. I leaned back my chair, creaking in the quiet apartment. The pieces were falling into place, each one fitting together with a sickening click. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. This was a calculated betrayal. I checked my work email, refreshing the inbox twice before a message from Theo, my firm's compliance officer, popped up. He'd attached the security footage from the first transaction, the one from that Tuesday morning. I clicked the link, the screen filling with grainy black and white footage of the bank lobby. A woman stepped up to the teller, head down, sunglasses on despite the dim interior. She slid what looked like a driver's license across the counter, her long hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. My breath caught. Even through the pixelated footage, I recognized that posture, the way she shifted from foot to foot, her fingers tapping anxiously on the counter. Emma. I watched as she handed the teller a slip of paper, her head tilting just enough for the camera to catch the side of her face as she glanced around, eyes hidden but unmistakably wary. She signed the slip with a quick, jagged stroke, her left hand trembling slightly. I paused the video, leaning in closer. I'd seen that handwriting before. Years of hastily scribbled birthday cards, post-it notes stuck to the fridge, grocery lists left on the counter. She hadn't even bothered to disguise it. I closed the laptop, my heart thudding in my chest. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, pure and simple, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and the thin black leather folder I kept for work emergencies. The one that held every receipt, every printout, every scrap of evidence I'd need to prove my innocence. As I stepped out into the cold morning air, my breath forming clouds in the crisp autumn air, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. Control. They wanted a villain. I'd give them one. I pulled into the parking lot of my firm, the tall glass building glinting in the pale morning light. I hadn't planned on going into the office today, but if I was going to unravel this mess, I needed every tool at my disposal. As I stepped through the revolving doors, the blast of central air hit me, the faint scent of printer ink and freshly brewed coffee, reminding me of countless late nights spent untangling the financial webs of strangers. Today, though, the stakes felt different. This wasn't just another case. This was personal. I made my way to my corner desk, passing the usual morning chaos. Coworkers clutching coffee cups, the clatter of keyboards, the low hum of whispered phone calls. My screen lit up as I logged in, the firm's secure servers whirring to life. I pulled up the bank transaction logs I'd extracted the night before, cross-referencing them against the timestamps from the security footage Theo had sent me. Emma's face, half hidden behind those cheap gas station sunglasses, flashed on my screen again, the camera catching her every nervous glance. I felt my jaw tighten as I paused the video, my finger hovering over the print button. I hesitated, my mind flicking back to those childhood summers spent together, chasing fireflies in the backyard, building forts from old bed sheets and dining room chairs. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memory wash over me, then hit print. As the printer spat out page after page of evidence, I moved on to my next target. Mom's email. I pulled up the metadata from her account, tracking every login, every password reset, every digital breadcrumb left behind. I noticed something odd. A series of logins from an IP address that didn't match Mom's home Wi-Fi. It wasn't mine either. I quickly copied the address, running it through our firm's locator tools. It pinged back to an apartment complex across town, the one where Emma's best friend Leah lived. I felt the pieces clicking into place, each revelation sharpening the edges of my anger. This wasn't just about the money. This was a coordinated effort, a deliberate, calculated betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes drifting to the stack of printouts on my desk. Emma had always been impulsive, reckless even, but this level of deceit felt like something else entirely. She hadn't just dipped into Mom's account. She'd built a digital maze to cover her tracks, leaning on Leah for support, maybe even guidance. I pushed back from my desk, the wheels of my chair squeaking against the polished floor. I needed more than just transaction logs and shaky security footage. I needed proof that would stand up in court if it came to that. I needed to dig deeper. I opened a fresh document, starting a timeline of every significant event leading up to the withdrawals. The hospital stay, where Emma had likely snagged Mom's bank info the day I set up the online account, the sudden appearance of the second phone number on Mom's account. Each event lining up like dominoes, one push away from a complete collapse. Next, I searched through my own messages, pulling up every family group chat I'd ignored in the past few weeks. Scrolling through the endless strings of happy birthdays and blurry family photos, I spotted a message from Emma 2 days before the first withdrawal. Emma. Hey, Mom said you helped her set up online banking. Everything working okay? I remembered the message. Now the faint flicker of suspicion I'd felt at the time quickly dismissed as paranoia. I'd replied with a quick thumbs-up emoji, too distracted by a work deadline to think much of it. I clicked back to the metadata, my fingers moving faster now. The phone number Emma had linked to Mom's account wasn't just a burner. It had been registered to a family plan under her name, disguised as a backup line for Mom. Clever. I had to give her that. I stood up, grabbing the stack of freshly printed pages, and tucking them into my leather folder. I didn't have the whole picture yet, but I had enough to start putting the pressure on. If Emma thought she could steamroll me, manipulate our parents, and walk away clean, she was in for a rude awakening. I paused at the office door, my reflection catching in the glass. I looked tired shadows clinging to the edges of my eyes, my hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense ponytail. I squared my shoulders, straightened my jacket, and stepped out into the hallway. It was time to remind my family who they were dealing with. The drive to Mom's house felt longer than usual, the gray clouds hanging low over the highway reflecting my mood. I had the printouts in my passenger seat, the leather folder weighing down the guilt I was trying to shake off. I should have seen this coming. I'd spent my career dissecting fraud, pulling apart financial lies thread by thread, but somehow I'd missed the signs in my own family. I pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under my tires. Nathan's SUV was parked at an awkward angle near the mailbox, and Emma's hatchback sat snug against the garage, its back window plastered with faded band stickers from a life she'd never really grown out of. I parked by the curb, killing the engine, but letting the weight of the moment settle over me. As I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaked under my boots, the same ones I used to sneak across as a kid, trying not to wake Mom when I'd stay out too late. I paused at the door, my fist hovering for a second before I knocked. I wasn't ready for this, but then again, I hadn't been ready for any of it. The door swung open, and I found myself face to face with Nathan. His expression a mix of surprise and thinly veiled irritation. He stepped back, letting me inside without a word, his eyes flicking to the folder in my hand. I stepped into the living room, the familiar smell of pine cleaner and vanilla candles wrapping around me, a stark contrast to the icy silence that followed my entrance. Emma was sprawled on the couch, her feet kicked up on the coffee table, fingers flying across her phone screen. She didn't look up. Mom was in the kitchen, her back to me, as she scrubbed a stubborn pan, the sound of metal scraping against porcelain filling the room. She stiffened slightly at the sound of my boots on the hardwood floor, but didn't turn around. "Family meeting?" I said, forcing a tight smile. "Didn't realize I was invited." Emma snorted, finally glancing up from her phone. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. Mom paused, her shoulders tense, but still didn't face me. The air felt thick, the kind of tension that clings to the walls and seeps into your bones. I dropped the folder onto the kitchen counter with a sharp slap, the sound echoing through the room. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "We need to talk about the $50,000. Emma's eyes flicked up again, her fingers freezing over her phone screen. Nathan's jaw tightened, a muscle in his cheek twitching. Mom finally turned her eyes, darting from my face to the folder, her wet hands clutching the dish towel like it might anchor her to the spot. I didn't take anything I said firmly, meeting each of their eyes in turn. But I know who did. Emma's face paled, a flicker of something. Panic, maybe, flashing in her eyes before she quickly looked away, focusing on the worn threads of the couch cushion. Nathan shifted his gaze, dropping to the floor. I flipped open the folder, spreading the pages across the counter like a dealer laying down a royal flush. Bank statements, phone records, IP logs. A forensic map of every lie, every carefully hidden transaction, every digital footprint they thought they'd erased. 3 withdrawals. I continued, my tone sharp, slicing through the silence. Each one from a different branch, each just under the reporting limit, and each traced back to this number. I jabbed a finger at the phone record, the digits standing out in stark, accusing black and white. A number registered under your name, Emma. Her face went from pale to crimson, her eyes narrowing into slits. She opened her mouth, probably to spit out some half-baked denial, but I didn't give her the chance. And the IP address? I tapped another sheet, the locator data clearly printed in neat, unforgiving lines. Leah's apartment. I guess that's where you've been hiding out whenever you disappear for days at a time. Nathan let out a slow breath, his shoulders sagging as he finally pushed off the doorframe. Mom's hands trembled, the dish towel slipping from her fingers to the floor with a soft, wet plop. "I trusted you," I said, my voice shaking now, the anger finally breaking through. "I thought we were family. I thought we looked out for each other. Emma's eyes flashed, her mouth tightening into a thin line. Don't act like you're some innocent victim, she shot back, her voice sharp-cutting. You've always acted like you're better than us. Like we owe you something just because you got out, because you have a fancy job and a nicer apartment. Well, guess what? You don't get to play the hero here. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fists clenching at my sides. I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom's voice cut through the tension, weak but clear. Emma, she said, her voice trembling, is it true? For a moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the wall clock marking each agonizing second. Emma dropped her gaze, her fingers tightening around the edge of the couch cushion. Mom, I didn't mean… Enough. I snapped, my voice echoing off the kitchen tiles. Don't even try to spin this. I have the receipts, the timestamps, the security footage. You took the money. You lied. You tried to frame me, and you dragged our family into it. Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes wide, the color draining from his face. Mom staggered back a step, her hand clapping over her mouth, a soft, choked sob escaping her lips. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. You wanted a villain, Emma. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Well, now you've got one. I turned on my heel, grabbing my folder and striding out the door, the cold autumn air hitting me like a slap as I stepped onto the porch. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces, their stunned, broken expressions. I didn't need to, because this time I was done being the one left holding the blame. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I found myself pulling into the empty parking lot of the old diner on the edge of town, the one Mom used to take us to for milkshakes after school when we were kids. The neon sign buzzed weakly above the entrance, half the letters burnt out. But the place still had that comforting, greasy smell I remembered, bacon coffee and burnt toast. I slid into a corner booth, the cracked vinyl seat creaking under my weight, and ordered a cup of black coffee from the tired-looking waitress, who didn't bother to ask if I wanted cream or sugar. I didn't. I needed something bitter to match the taste in my mouth, the bile still rising from my confrontation with Emma and Nathan. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket, hesitating for a moment before opening my messages. I scrolled past the angry text from Nathan, the half-hearted apologies from Mom, and the desperate rambling voicemails Emma had left since I stormed out. My thumb hovered over my law firm's contact, the one I kept for emergencies. The one I'd never thought I'd need for my own family. I took a long, scalding sip of my coffee, letting the heat burn away the last traces of doubt. Then I hit call. Lauren Theo's voice crackled through the line, the background hum of the office chaos, faint but familiar. You all right? You never call on weekends. I'm fine. I lied, my voice steady, despite the knot in my stomach. I need you to pull a few strings for me. I have a case I need fast-tracked. Family matter. Theo hesitated, the line crackling with the weight of his unspoken questions. He'd known me long enough to hear the edge in my voice, the tightness that only came when I was on the verge of something big. Send me the files, he said. Finally, his tone shifting to the cold, professional cadence I'd come to rely on over the years. I'll push it through. I ended the call, my pulse pounding in my ears. I thumbed through my phone's gallery, pulling up the photos of the bank records, the IP logs, the security footage, and the copies of Emma's phone registrations. I attached them to a secure email, my fingers moving faster with each click, the anger building into a cold, focused burn. I hit send, my phone vibrating gently as the message zipped off into the ether, and leaned back in the booth, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. It was out of my hands now, the wheels set in motion. I'd let the lawyers do their work, let the courts sort out the legal fallout. But I wasn't done. I picked up my coffee cup, swirling the bitter dregs as my mind spun through the next steps. I wasn't just going to walk away from this, wasn't going to let my family paint me as the villain in their twisted little drama. I needed to set the record straight, to reclaim the narrative they'd tried to twist against me. I left the diner, an hour later, my coffee cup long empty, the sun slipping behind the distant hills, casting the world in a bruised purple light. I climbed back into my car, the engine rumbling to life, and pointed the nose of my old sedan back toward my apartment. When I got home, I tossed my jacket onto the couch, the leather folder thumping heavily against the cushions. I grabbed my laptop, flipping it open as I sank onto the floor, my back against the cool plaster of the living room wall. I opened a blank document, the cursor blinking at me expectantly, and started to type. To whom it may concern. My name is Lauren, and I'm writing this to clear my name. I'm the daughter of a loving mother, a diligent accountant, and the sibling of 2 people who betrayed my trust in ways I never imagined possible. What I'm about to share isn't just a defense, it's the truth. A month ago, I helped my mother set up online banking, trusting my family with the passwords and access codes, believing in the bond we shared. I never imagined that my own sister would use that access to steal from our mother to frame me for a crime I didn't commit, to turn our family against me. I have the records, the bank logs, the IP addresses, the security footage, the proof, and I won't be silent about it anymore. I hit save the file name, blinking back at me. Family lies, the truth they didn't want you to know. I sat back, my heart racing, my mind already spinning through the next steps. The social media posts, the emails to old family friends, the carefully worded messages to the few relatives I still trusted. They'd tried to paint me as the thief, the outcast, the black sheep of our little clan. But I wasn't going to let them write my story, not this time. I clicked over to my firm's secure server, uploading the file, locking it behind a dozen layers of encryption, and hit send, the message flying off into the digital void, a tiny, powerful act of defiance. I leaned back against the wall, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps, the weight of the past few days crashing over me in waves. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, hot and uninvited, but I let it fall, let it trace a path down my jaw before flicking it away. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Story 2. I was standing outside my childhood home on Christmas Eve, clutching a pecan pie that had taken me 5 hours to prepare. The air was hazy from my breath. Even with the gloves on, the cold stung my fingertips. I could see shadows dancing around the living room and a faint, soft gold glittering behind the frosted glass. I was a decorator once, annually. The gentle clink of wine glasses reached my ears. Laughter, something toasty. The doorbell rang. A moment passed, 5 perhaps. The door then opened. There she stood. Mom. Sequins in the shape of reindeer antlers adorned her pullover. Her gaze remained fixed on mine. Slowly, with her hand still on the knob, she apologized. You're in the wrong house, in my opinion. I blinked. Mom. She gave me a courteous grin as if I were a lawyer. I apologize. You're not someone I recognize. Not even a pause was heard. Just that face, no wink, no hushed joke. Be calm. Be cautious. Closed. It's me. My voice trailed off to a whisper as I spoke. Emily. She continued to smile. I hope you end up where you should be. The door then closed softly. No slam. Avoid conflict. Only finality. Pie in my hands. I stood there, the chill seeping through my coat sleeves. Perhaps this was a terrible prank, I thought. An evil family trick. So I waited. A minute, 2. Nobody emerged from within. The music was still audible to me. Someone close to the kitchen burst out laughing as Sinatra's voice encircled clinking glasses, as though they were celebrating the festival I believed I was a part of. Back on the path, I took a step. In the snow, my boots didn't make any noise. My phone then buzzed. Ryan, my sibling, I replied. I spoke in a tense voice. Don't be angry, he added hastily. However, we were unable to admit you. Not this evening. I didn't answer. Ma'am, it's complex. Don't cause a scene, please. All right, a scene. I gazed at the pie still warm in my palms. What was the duration of their planning? The stranger at the door wasn't always me. At one point, my name appeared on every energy bill shopping list and late appreciated thank you note when Dad suffered a stroke. To schedule his appointments, arrange his medicines, and complete his disability papers, I took unpaid leave. Mom couldn't do it by herself. I took care of it since Ryan was too stressed. I sent 3 months' worth of payments in one night when the mortgage almost went into default 2 winters ago. Nobody inquired. They simply thought I would take care of it. And I did, since, after all, that's what a capable daughter does. No commotion. You don't have to tell her that she's required. She simply shows up, repairs things, and then vanishes once more. The year my father lost his job, I purchased the Christmas tree. Wrapped presents that I bought for and labeled from my parents. For 7 consecutive months, I paid Ryan's rent. When he paused to reflect on himself. When Mom texted, I didn't even bat an eye. Can you help Ryan again, sweetie? You are aware of how difficult it has been for him. No. How are you? No. Have you got enough? Just, could you? And I did every time. I brought the wine, the sides, the dessert, and the roasted turkey last Thanksgiving. I cooked Mom's favorite cranberry tart, set the table, and got there early. Everyone gathered in front of the fireplace when it came time for the family portrait. Can you take it, Emily? Mom said, passing the camera to me. In this case, we only want the family. I shrugged it off and chuckled, but I can still recall how my hands trembled when I inquired about it. You're simply so independent, honey, Mom added later. We were never actually necessary for you. Autonomous. The courteous term for invisible. After I was turned away from our own front door, Ryan, the same brother I carried emotionally and financially, told me not to raise a fuss. He left me a voicemail last year, and I recalled it. Without you, Mom, I don't know what I'd do. And I learned exactly what he would do tonight. Close the door. Was I only a temporary solution? Everyone forgot about the emotional sponge. What made me the only one they don't see unless there's a breakdown? I was awake earlier than the sun the next morning. I hadn't actually slept. I just laid there looking up at my small apartment's ceiling. The screen of my phone was still glowing from Ryan's most recent notification. Allow it to enter. You're exaggerating the situation. The group chat that we used for family vacations was no longer there when I accessed it. Not for me, anyhow. I looked for Christmas pictures from the previous year. One mother had posted, I discovered. The light was streaming into the living area. Dad had a box of presents. Ryan was holding his new girlfriend by the arm. Everyone is grinning. All but me, since I wasn't involved. Not in the background. The tags don't include it. Not even in the comments. It seemed as though I had never been there. Not everything happened at once. The trick is that they do it gently when they delete you. Forgetting to inform you about dinner plans is the first step. Then comes the, oh, we assumed you were occupied. Then when you're not present, the joke is directed at you. And lastly, the edited group texts mails and images in which you are just left out. It was clear, but never loud. After Dad's stroke, I created a pooled savings account for emergencies, and I logged in. None of the recent moves were mine, yet my name was still on the list. This time they hadn't even requested assistance. They simply moved on. Until I checked my mail, I assumed that would be the worst-case scenario. A letter from a legal office was present. I initially freaked out, assuming it had to do with the mortgage or Dad's health. It was a notification, though. Mom's will had been revised. I was not on the list. I blinked as I read it twice. 2 years prior, I had assisted my mother in creating that very paper. Covered the cost of the consultation. The health directive was typed. Even made sure Ryan was mentioned even if he didn't contribute. She left the house to her father for as long as he lives there, then to Ryan and her valuables to Ryan's girlfriend. Not a thing for me. Not even a reference. On her own, she's doing well. Notes from the meeting had been scrawled by the lawyer. Nothing is needed. That was her explanation. Nor with rejection, nor with rage. Just common sense. I didn't need to be a part of the future, therefore I wasn't. Was it my only contribution till I became too inconvenient to be ignored? I refrained from arguing. It wasn't a lengthy message. I didn't inquire as to why. I accessed my banking app just now. First, my parents' account no longer received the automatic rent transfer. The pooled savings account comes in second. My name was taken out. Third, I handed Ryan my emergency card as a precaution. Blocked. Every movement was similar to clicking a door shut rather than smashing or locking it. There were no tears or a surge of rage, just a pure, weird silence. Like the silence that follows a snowfall. The pecan pie was mine. They left it on their porch, unopened. No message, no note. Then I turned to go. Their home's lights vanished in the rearview mirror as I was driving, obscured by the ice. The alerts had begun by the time I arrived home. My screen is lit up like fireflies in a jar with missed calls, voicemails, group texts, and names. Parents, Ryan, including my aunt who hadn't communicated with me for a year. What's happening? Your mom is not happy. Emily picked up the phone. Don't do this, please. However, I didn't. I never opened them. Not with malice. Simply because there were no more questions. I prepared tea, shut off my phone, and sat by the window to see the snow falling. It used to hurt to be chilly. It felt like armor now. I was present. I spoke in a whisper to nobody. Simply put, I wasn't allowed inside. Would they miss me or only the assistance I provided if I disappeared? The quiet was short-lived. I had a full voicemail by the second day. Mom started making phone calls from her work line by the third. The tone of Ryan's letters shifted from defensive to angry to begging. I'm not sure what you're attempting to demonstrate. Are you really going to abandon your mother in this manner? Okay, I understand. This goes too far, even though you're crazy. I didn't answer. I suddenly realized that my presence had never been the purpose, not because I wanted to punish them. Only my role. Then the Fishers appeared. Mrs. Daly, a neighbor, texted me a week after Christmas. She had spent decades living next door to my parents. She continued to make her own bread. Nevertheless, I watched everything. Outside, your mother has been sobbing. She and your dad were in the yard when I noticed them. They were having a disagreement on the mortgage. Another communication after 2 days. Ryan's girlfriend departed. Did you know that claimed to have used her whole credit limit? While he was at work, moved out. I didn't respond. I simply sat with my tea in hand on my couch and allowed the chill to return to my chest. Then the picture appeared. I hadn't muted it yet when it appeared in a social media discussion. Ryan is holding a fresh 5. I'm smiling. Using the hashtag #TreatYourself, the captioned person got lucky this year. I had given him the emergency one. Gas, groceries, interviews. When I departed, it was still in operation. Later, but not in time, I had suppressed it. That evening, Mom called. She spoke sharply, worn thin. Your dad is quite angry. They don't pay the rent. Ryan is having problems. I'm not able to accomplish this alone. It was never about them needing me, therefore I didn't respond. It dealt with what transpired after I ceased to be invisible. For years, they had settled on a story. The dreamer Ryan. The one who simply required more time. Me, the sturdy one. The source, the rock. However, what occurs if the supplier ceases to appear? They leaned on more than just the safety net, which is why the structure collapsed. The foundation was her. And everything they had constructed on top of me started to crumble as I managed to get myself free. I refrained from boasting. The 5 posts were not screenshotted. I kept the fact that I had anticipated this a secret. For the first time, their situation wasn't mine to handle, so I just put my phone down, closed the app, and let it ring. Mom's voicemail was the first thing that happened. We're not all right, Emily. Once more, your father's heart is misbehaving. I'm afraid. Give me a call, please. No, I apologize. No, we ought not to have excluded you. It's just guilt twisted into terror. Then Dad's email arrived. We must speak. Don't allow this to ruin the family, whatever it is. And lastly, the unexpected text message from someone. Ryan's girlfriend. At dinners with the family, she would whisper and take me aside. The only person with a complete intellect in that home is you. I thought she understood, but now she wrote, Don't stir things up now, please. There is a lot of strain on everyone. Perhaps just ignore this. Give it up. Let them continue to treat you that way, said the same girl who had earlier told me that I deserved more than how they treat me. It's simpler. None of them got a response from me. I was upset that they hadn't seen me yet, not because I was resentful. I wasn't a sister or a daughter to them. I was a switch, a lever, a button to repair it. They desired to press once again. My return was not desired by them. They desired the unquestioning version of me. When asked to leave the picture, the version that prepared the meal paid the expenses. In another voicemail, Mom stated in a nearly prepared tone, "It's not about who's right. The goal is to preserve the family unit." Despite my departure, the family remained intact. When they concluded that I didn't belong unless I remained silent and helpful, it was broken. Why do they act as though you're the one shattering everything when you eventually say enough? Once I consented to see them. No tension, no conflict. They want to keep me out of the living room on a Sunday afternoon. Mom was cleaning. I got Dad a sweater 2 Christmases ago and he wore it. It was only when I sat down that Ryan looked up from his phone. Nobody apologized. Mom reached for my hand instead, like if nothing had occurred. "This has gotten out of hand, Emily. We are related." That term, once more, I glanced at her and then at my father. "Then you closed the door in my face, Ryan. You told me I didn't belong," I said. "And you recalled my name when the rent stopped being paid." Dad sighed as if I were exaggerating. "We were under pressure. You misinterpreted it." It nearly made me chuckle. "Is there a proper method for being deleted?" Ryan laughed. "Do you believe that you are the victim? You've been aloof all along, made us feel obligated to you at all times." I blinked. "Yes, you owed me. I left the lights on. I covered Christmas expenses. I covered your gas tuition and second chances." Since everyone understood it to be true, there was no argument. Despite the tears in her eyes, Mom did not apologize. "My dear, you've always been so self-reliant. We believed you were not in need of us." I got to my feet. I didn't require assistance. I required acknowledgement, quiet. "You don't walk away from family," said Dad. I gave him my full attention. "You left already. You simply did it more subtly." They all looked in awe, not indignant, as if they had just heard something they couldn't deny. I grabbed my coat, the identical one I wore at their door that evening. I went around again before I left and told them that I was there, something they couldn't dispute. Simply put, you had an easier time when I didn't. I left without slamming the door, not awaiting their next move, just finished. I woke up the following morning to nothing. No voicemails, missed calls, or desperate texts with anger or guilt. Simply be silent. I saw snow fall like dust from the sky as I sat by the window sipping my coffee. In years, for the first time. I had no idea what I was going to solve. No schedule transfers. There are no groceries to pay for. No calls to return. Nothing except silence. I wasn't afraid of it either. And I took out an old box with the name Home after opening the closet in the corridor. The book of family photos was within. Frozen grins for pages and pages. Birthdays. Beach excursions. Commencements. There I was, holding the camera, usually a little off-center, carrying the cake, taking the fall for it. I put the album on the top shelf after closing it, far back beneath the winter blanket. I then made my way to my vehicle. There was still the pecan pie I brought on Christmas Eve. The crust had broken. Inward, the filling had crumbled, still in its wrapping, unaltered. I took it up and placed it on the front step of a church I had never been inside before. No explanation, no remark. There was only a lovely remnant. My phone buzzed when I got home. Mom sent one message. The home was lost. Ryan left home. Your father accuses me. I was mistaken. Emily, please, return home. After staring at it, I hit the delete button. No response. I didn't want to discipline her, simply because they had already determined that I didn't belong and I had already reached the door. I stepped outdoors once again. This time, no coat. Let my flesh sting from the cold. It was painless. Not as it once was. It didn't freeze in this type of temperature. It went clear. The sky was open and the street was quiet. And I grinned for the first time in years. I didn't need to be needed, nor because someone needed me. Please leave a remark if you have ever stood at a door that ought to have opened but didn't. Story 3. Mom didn't weep. The phone was not slammed by her. She did not inquire as to why. Backyard, she said. Julia, really, it isn't a legitimate wedding. That's a poor person's garden party. She hung up after that. I knew she wouldn't show up at that point. Not because she was ill, not because it was a bad date, not even due of any emergency in the family. Because she didn't think my wedding was worth attending, she refused to come. It was too small, not ostentatious enough. She was not given a stage. After that call, I sat on our porch for a while, the cold air slicing through my sweatshirt and the ancient wood pushing on the backs of my thighs. I gripped the phone as if it were still ringing, as if she may phone back and claim that she didn't mean it or that it was a joke. However, the quiet just became the norm, immovable and dented. Eventually, Malik emerged with 2 tea glasses. He didn't inquire as to what transpired. He didn't have to. He just gave me the cup and sat next to me, allowing the steam to rise between us like a silent, understanding curtain. No, she answered. At last, I whispered. He gave a nod. As it's located in the backyard. I choked back a little sour chuckle. As it isn't a ballroom. No monogrammed napkins, no chandeliers. Wine pairings are not served with plated meat tenderloin. It's not what she had in mind when she thought of the day her daughter got married. She pictured herself in it. After a moment, he said, That touched down. It has nothing to do with me. It wasn't. The lighting scheme was not questioned by Mom. For 6 months, I built everything from scratch using recycled glass bottles and manually wiring hundreds of tiny LED bulbs. She didn't inquire about how we excavated and replanted the wildflower beds ourselves, or how we transformed our backyard into a lantern-lit grove. She didn't inquire as to why we were only inviting 25 people or what it meant to us to exchange vows at the event where we forged our lives. Not some hourly rental facility. Only once weeks ago did she inquire, scoffing. I take it you're not doing it potluck style? She didn't hold out for a response. You know, it's weird. Some individuals just consider the aesthetics of a wedding. Who I married didn't matter to my mother. She was concerned about what people might say and where. What sort of images would Facebook display? She refused to attend my wedding. She wanted attention. In any case, I invited her. Printed, not sent via email, lavender fragrance embossed, tied with silk thread. On the morning it arrived, there was never an RSVP. She simply sent me one SMS. It appears to have been produced by a homeschooler. It nearly made me chuckle. Most likely she had forgotten. She requested that I be homeschooled for 3 years. When the person who reared you informs you that your life doesn't measure up without yelling or swearing, what do you do? When your mother determines that your most memorable day isn't even worth an Uber journey, what do? You mourn. Then you continue. The lamp is hung by you. Your dress is pressed. You record everything and revise your vows. My mother's world had always been a conditional place for me to be. The second daughter was me, the more subdued one, the one who wore her sister's hand-me-downs and never once questioned why I was missing from whole pages of the family photo albums. During the wedding of Rachel, the big one, the one about which Mom still boasts to anybody who has a Christmas newsletter or a reading club, I didn't serve as a bridesmaid. The family wasn't even seated with me. In order to ensure that the buffet didn't run out of crab cakes and that the violinist didn't start too early, I was positioned behind the flowery arches with a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. The inexpensive flats I wore that day, which were blistered after the first dance, were from a clearance bin. Rachel's clothing is something I recall. The price of the hand-beaded imported silk exceeded the cost of my college tuition. And how right before the ceremony, Mom made adjustments to the train. She looked like she was crowning royalty with tears in her eyes. When I attempted to enter the room to take a picture, she murmured, "You'll get your turn." It was never my turn. Instead, I was given chores. Take this with you. Verify that. Be helpful. Stay out of the path. I only show up in a grainy side profile photo with myself cleaning the cake table in the backdrop, which is the only photo I took for the whole wedding weekend. I was once asked for assistance after being tagged in it. I chuckled. They weren't corrected by me. I knew where I belonged by then. I thus informed my mother that I was organizing a tiny private event outside that would only involve vows and shared bread, no speeches or bridal party. She blinked. "Little," she repeated, "illegal," as I had stated. She made a lip pass. "That is disheartening. Julia, you want something that people will remember, don't you?" I desired something that would stick in my memory. I desired the individuals I cared about. The man I had selected. Under open sky plates music, hand to hand, rather than cold chicken, served by name-tagged servers. Chandeliers weren't necessary for me. I didn't require a cake worth $10,000. Mom's expression, however, told me that I had already failed, that my decisions had made her feel ashamed, and that I had not won the wedding or the scale. However, I was too little. A week later, Rachel phoned. Perhaps I reasoned she was attempting to break the increasing silence. "Mom is concerned that you're having a breakdown," she said. "She claims that because you're terrified of being the center of attention, you're ruining your own wedding." I gave her space to speak. "Thank you," I said. I ended the call. They were unable to comprehend. They didn't. I wasn't engaging in sabotage. Reclamation was the term. My mother wasn't on stage at this wedding. It was not a moment for family PR. I hadn't seen my second cousins since middle school, so it wasn't a parade. I owned it. Furthermore, I had no intention of planning it as if I were requesting permission. The sky was gray on the morning of my wedding, but it wasn't dangerous. It was the sort of gray that intensified the contrast between colors. The type that makes each flower resemble a brushstroke. On the back porch, I stood barefoot and gazed at the rows of mismatched chairs that we had borrowed from our neighbors. Each chair was tied with leftover pieces of dyed ribbon. The paper lanterns we had strung between the trees were being pulled by the slight increase in wind. Silently, they danced. Claire was heating my dress inside. A silky cream dress, easy to use with pockets. It had been stitched by her. Everything. A little gesture of affection. Place cards were being laid out on the large oak table by Malik's cousin. No gold embossing, no calligraphy. All that was needed were names printed on seed paper, which each visitor could take home and plant. I moved gently across the room, touching every chair and glass jar that held field flowers and herbs. These weren't stand-ins. These were choices and plans. There was a purpose for every detail, and love was the driving force behind it all. No makeup artist, no bridal suite. I'm holding just my bathroom mirror. When I stepped into the garment, I tucked 2 gardenias behind my ear and curled my hair up into a loose notch. It had the feel of armor. To keep myself together, not to defend myself. I looked at Claire in the mirror. "Are you all right?" I gave a nod. "I believe so." After adjusting a loose strap, she approached me from behind. "You appear to be yourself." Never in my life did I feel more like myself. At 4:12 p.m., the event got underway. Birdsong, no prelude. The creak of the gate and the wind as the visitors entered politely and silently seemed like they were entering a moment in time as a memory was being created. With a crooked smile and a blue suit, Malik stood at the end of the aisle, which was simply the garden walk. When he saw me, his hands trembled. Mine did as well. There was no officiant present. There was no script for us to read from. Instead of addressing the audience, we addressed one another. Although I can't recall precisely what we said, I do recall how it felt. Like for the first time in years, standing motionless. Like someone listening to you without waiting for your chance to talk. Everyone applauded after we shared a kiss. Not courteously, but completely. Giant enamel pots were used to serve my favorite sound meal. Family style. No plated service, no servers. Laughter reverberated from the ivy-covered finch as bowls were handed along the table. A Van Morrison song is being hummed by someone, using a borrowed speaker to play. The light turned on as darkness fell. Countless hours of meticulous positioning and wiring, and the entire yard was glowing, as if every tree had been colonized by fireflies. At one point, Claire remarked, "This looks like a movie set." However, it didn't. Even while I laughed, drank, and danced barefoot beneath those lights, I knew that the folks who were missing wouldn't see this because it looked like home. Not in context, not in color, and not in real time. The way Malik stared at me during our first dance would be hidden from them. The toasts from those who truly knew us would go unheard. They wouldn't smell the rosemary smoke from the barbecue, or taste the fig cake or lavender lemonade. It would be too late by the time they saw the images. We had no intention of posting anything, not immediately anyhow. As a present, our buddy Devin, who is a filmmaker rather than a wedding videographer, had offered to capture the event. Like a recollection, she fired it. No expansive drone footage, no veil tossing in slow motion. We were laying tables, just the two of us, repairing hair, holding hands under the light of a string. She sent over a 90-second short clip 2 weeks after the wedding. No captions, no narrative, only music, slow and gentle. Before the ceremony started, Malik was wiping his palms on his slacks. Then we saw me wrapping a ribbon around a container of wildflowers. We were dancing barefoot on the flagstones in the last picture as the paper lanterns swayed overhead like stars, feigning proximity. I started crying. Before calling Malik in, I watched it 3 times by myself in our living room. As it played, he said nothing. After it was over, he exhaled deeply and remarked, "She made it feel like something ancient." I gave a nod. "Is posting it petty, in your opinion?" He grinned, but not cruelly. "Petty can sometimes be the truth. Told at last." I thus posted it in private. No captions, no hashtags. Past the 8th of October. Love, home. I put my phone away after that and went to bed. The number of views had surpassed 20,000 by morning. It had surpassed 50 by midday. I had received a message by supper from a contributor on an independent design blog. "Is this your wedding? Is it possible to include it in our upcoming issue?" I read the message again after blinking at it. We were featured in 2 online publications and a viral compilation story headlined, "The Most Beautiful Backyard Wedding You've Ever Seen" by the end of the week, which surprised me. I felt no vindication. Not quite. In a manner I hadn't anticipated, I felt seen. People who hadn't practiced a version of me they liked better not strangers. Then the calls began. Rachel first. "Why didn't you warn us that it would sound like that?" She left a message that began with "wow" and finished with "so." Then my aunt texted me. "I can't get that wedding video off my feed. I was unaware that it belonged to you. Beautiful." And lastly, my mom. No phone call, only a text. Just one line. Was I not invited to this wedding? I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. She was, in theory, invited. She simply didn't bother to respond. She followed up the next morning. "Julia, you made us seem awful. The question of why we weren't there keeps coming up. You had the opportunity to alert us." Issued a warning. I went over the message once more. However, I couldn't tell which section offended her the most. That she was not present for the wedding. Alternatively, it was gorgeous. This has nothing to do with damaged sentiments. It has to do with image. Image had always been a factor. Her text went unanswered by me. Not immediately. I didn't know how to respond to someone who was more angry over missing the occasion than being excluded from the pictures. 3 days later, however, after Malik rewatched the short video with a glass of wine in hand and a prolonged pause after its conclusion, I did reply. "Let her see it," he replied quietly. "She obviously doesn't comprehend what she missed, not because she deserves it." I thus sent a message, "If you're interested in knowing the truth, on Friday at 3, stop by the studio. The entire video is available for viewing." Nothing was changed. 2 hours later, she responded in writing. All right. Her tardiness was 10 minutes. Pearls of War. She did, of course. Entered the little documentary studio as though she were visiting a potential charity to give to. Courteous, cool, detached. I made no small talk. I didn't give her a hug. The screening room had been prepared for us by Devin. Silence, a little monitor, and 2 seats. The lights went down. For the first 5 minutes, I hit play. She folded her arms as she sat. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched her anticipating the snort, the condescending laugh, the scorn. It never materialized. The video did not have a narrator. No music, just actual sound. Glasses, clinking footsteps on gravel. From the back row, there was laughter. As I read the vows, my voice trembled. He stumbled over his own Malik. His throat tightened as he said, "You give me the impression that I arrived home at minute 12. She moved. When the television showed us dancing beneath the light lanterns blazing like warm planets overhead at minute 20, she blinked frantically. She let out a breath like if she had been holding it. I paused the screen when the video concluded. Only a static picture of the yard with stubs from candles and vacant seats. She remained silent for a while. Then it appeared pricey. I waited. She cleared her throat. And you didn't say, "That's how it will be." I spoke steadily as I turned to face her. Would it have made a difference? She parted her lips. I closed it. You're invited. I said. You said no. You failed to clarify. I interrupted her. Mom, I wasn't trying out for your favor. I was getting married. She turned her head away. The quiet was not felt by me. Her voice was rougher and more defensive when she finally looked me in the eye. You gave the impression that we were unconcerned. I cocked my head. Did you? She winced. A little hardly noticeable movement at the corner of her mouth. She didn't respond, though. I got up, went to the door, and pushed it open. I appreciate you coming. She stood for a moment, then sat down again. For a moment only. I had no idea it would be so lovely, she remarked. The point is that, quietly I answered, didn't you want to know? She went without giving me a hug. I didn't think she would. However, I sensed a change as the door clicked behind her, not healing nor closure, simply clarity. It was some time before I heard from her again. There was no lengthy letter, no follow-up call, and no backtracking cloaked in a pathetic apology. Just silence, which oddly seemed more sincere than anything we had spoken about in years. I was not present during Thanksgiving. Did not get a Christmas invitation. No one contacted me yet, no one claimed I was disconnected. It was a silent exile, the sort that begins as separation and ends with erasure. And I was all right. The steady, grounded approach, not the victorious movie ending way. The realization that you don't need to keep trying to open a door that never does. Rather, I gave my all to our lives, to work, and to Malik. An artists' organization in Seattle acquired the entire version of the wedding film. It was shown in a gallery exhibition called Intimate Architecture. We took a plane to the opening. People wept when they watched it. A pair inquired as to whether we were actors. No, I told them. Just a woman whose life had really started in her backyard where she wedded her husband. It was 6 months later. I found a tiny gift on our doorstep one day when I got home. My name, no return address, in meticulous cursive. I recognized right away. There was a picture inside. I had never witnessed Rachel's wedding. I had a tray of champagne flutes in the backdrop. My face twisted a little and my gaze shifted to something just out of sight. There was a note on the reverse of the picture. 2 lines. On that day, I completely ignored you. Now I see you. No signature, no name. However, I didn't require one. It wasn't framed by me. Didn't provide a thank you call. I just cut it out and put it in the back of our wedding album. Under the lanterns, illuminated by the glow of 100 little lamps, I was spinning behind an image of Malik grinning barefoot as we laughed. I'll share that anecdote if someone inquires about our wedding. We did it our own way, I'll tell them. We put wildflowers where people anticipated roses, I'll tell them. That we used our hands to feed our visitors. Not a checklist for caterers. That we laughed under the paper moon and danced on gravel. And that everyone who was important was invited, even those who failed to appear. Because ultimately, who attends a wedding doesn't make it. Who remains makes it. And I can't see what's missing when I look at the pictures now. I can see what's left.